our haters who are out there watching.
I want to warn people about hypnoporn.
I need to stay meta.
Like, what?
If Jim would shut up for a second.
Oh, high fidelity.
Okay, don't tell me to shut up.
I'm not whining.
I eat doggies. I eat doggies. Feels like a party.
Stop that.
It's a war. They have made it so that I cannot be celebrating July 4th.
This is 6 Degrees of Stew. You don't need to stay meta, but I'm glad you're here. Hey everybody, it's good to be back. I know this has been a while, but this is just going to be a static recording, and I'm going to have it uploaded everywhere: YouTube, Twitch, Patreon, and Spotify. And then I'm going to start going live again on different topics. But there's been a lot going on personally in my life, and other things that have kind of stymied on things that I wanted to work on. So today we are going to be going over the battle over the President's House slavery exhibit in Philadelphia. There's been a slight resolution as I was preparing this when I did want to do a live on it, but there's going to be a battle over it for a while, I think. So I have a slight introduction. I have some videos and some explanation of what that is. So I'm going to start with that. The battle over the President's House slavery exhibit in Philadelphia. On Independence Mall in Philadelphia, just steps from the Liberty Bell, stands a memorial that tells a harder truth about the nation's founding. The President's House site, where George Washington lived and where at least 9 people were held in slavery. For years, an outdoor installation called The President's House, Freedom and Slavery in the Making of a New Nation has invited visitors to confront the reality in the very shadow of America's most cherished symbols of liberty. In early 2026, that story was nearly erased from public view. Following a directive from the Trump administration to review and remove exhibits that were said to, quote, inappropriately disparage Americans past or living, end quote, National Park Service staff began taking down the glass panels that told the stories of Washington's enslaved workers. The display panels that named them described their lives and explained how slavery underpinned the early presidencies were removed from the site and placed in storage, even as thousands of visitors continued to walk past the empty framework on Independence Mall. The reaction in Philadelphia was swift. City officials, historians, and community advocates argued that the removal broke commitments made when the memorial was created, that the site would not just commemorate the presidents who lived there, but also the enslaved people who made that household function. They contended that stripping away the slavery panels did more than change a design choice. It actively distorted the historical record presented to the public. The city of Philadelphia, joined by allies, took the federal government to court. Their case centered on 2 ideas: that the public had a right to an honest interpretation of this nationally significant site, and that previous agreements about how the president's house would be presented could not be unilaterally reversed for political reasons. In legal filings and public statements, they warned that allowing the removal to stand would pave the way for broader sanitizing of how the National Park Service tells the story of the United States. A federal judge, Cynthia Ruffey, agreed that the stakes were high. In a strongly worded ruling, she issued an injunction ordering the Interior Department and the National Park Service to restore the exhibit while the lawsuit plays out. She barred officials, at least for now, from replacing the interpretive materials with a new, softer narrative that downplayed slavery. Ruffey set a firm deadline by 5 p.m. on a Friday in mid-February. The panels had to be back on site. Leaving them in storage any longer, she wrote, would cause irreparable harm by depriving visitors of a full and accurate understanding of the nation's origins. In the days that followed, workers returned to the president's house site to reinstall the glass panels and accompanying displays. Slowly, the structure began to look familiar again. The names of the 9 enslaved individuals back in the public view. Their stories once more interwoven with the architecture of the early presidency and the language of freedom that echoed just across the mall in Independence Hall. Yet even as the panels went back up, the fight was far from over. The Trump administration and the Interior Department insisted that the executive branch has broad authority to shape how history is presented on federal property. They appealed Judge Rufe's order to the Third Circuit, signaling that they would continue to press for greater control over the content of exhibits like this one. For Philadelphia and for many advocates who have fought for the memorial's creation, the injunction and reinstallation marked a significant, if fragile, victory. It affirmed, at least temporarily, that the story of the president's house cannot be told without centering the lives of the enslaved people who lived and labored there. It also underscored how vulnerable public history can be to political pressure, especially in an election-charged climate. All of this is unfolding as the nation approaches the 250th anniversary of 1776, when Philadelphia will once again become the focal point for celebrations, reflections, and debates about the meaning of American freedom. The president's house site, with its layered story of liberty and bondage, sits at the heart of that conversation. What visitors see there in the coming years, whether a frank portrayal of slavery's role in the founding or a more sanitized narrative, will say a great deal about how the United States chooses to remember itself at this milestone. For now, if you walk onto Independence Mall, you will once again find the slavery exhibit in place. You can read about the 9 enslaved members of Washington's household, trace their stories across the walls of glass, and stand in the footprints of the house where they lived and worked. That experience, however, exists under a kind of legal and political suspense. The panels are back, but their future depends on how the courts rule and on whether those in power see historical honesty as a duty or as something up for negotiation. And I'm going to start the videos, and I will also have sourcing for this on the timeline of how this all went down. Okay, we'll start with the first one that my husband and I became aware of when this all started going down. Let me share my screen here. Make sure it's big. Make sure the closed captions are on. Okay, there we go.
Right now, controversy over the removal of a slavery exhibit at Independence National Historical Park. Today, all that's left, empty bolt holes and shadows on the brick walls where panels once stood at the president's house site. Some critics today coming to the site, adding protest signs in their place. The removal coming following an executive order from President Donald Trump that specifically called out Independence National Historical Park for what the president called a widespread effort to rewrite our nation's history, replacing objective facts with a distortive narrative driven by ideology rather than the truth. Jennifer, a lot of emotion over the removal of this exhibit.
Absolutely. The community has been showing up in force and also posting protest messages, as you mentioned, all over the president's house site, expressing their disappointment, sadness, and anger. The President's House exhibit opened in 2010, telling the stories of those who lived and worked at President George Washington's home, including the 9 individuals who were enslaved. Roz McPherson is the original project director.
The site came out of protest of the black community to acknowledge enslavement in the most historic mile in the country.
On Thursday, cameras captured National Park Service workers removing the exhibit. And on Friday, even the information stand is now a blank canvas.
I was very upset. So I felt as a resident of Philadelphia, I needed to come and see what had happened.
Some brought flowers, others taking a private moment of reflection. High school art teacher Miranda Thompson brought her students on an impromptu field trip to learn about what she now calls missing U.S. history.
It is crucial that we don't allow history to be replaced, even when it's history that we find embarrassing or shameful.
It's wrong because it's erasure, and it's hiding our truth, and it's hiding our history.
The National Park Service and the Department of the Interior says it's following President Trump's executive order, and says after undergoing the required review, quote, the National Park Service is now taking action to remove or revise interpretive materials in accordance with the order.
We all know it's petty, and we hope that Philadelphia sets the standard for these kinds of fights in other historic sites, because it's happening everywhere.
McPherson says there are multiple lawsuits being filed, including the city of Philadelphia's against the federal agencies. Mayor Sherelle Parker says her team is reviewing a 2006 cooperative agreement between the city and federal government.
That agreement requires parties to meet and confer if there are to be any changes made to an exhibit.
By Friday afternoon, the empty exhibits were filled with colorful protest messages saying history is real.
We have opened up in so many ways to learn all pieces of history, and this is just, I think it's setting us back.
Without Black history, there's really no history.
And organizations protesting the removal of these exhibit signs are holding a virtual town hall tonight. It starts at 6:45, and we'll have a link up to that meeting on fox29.com. Don and Jason.
Okay, Jennifer Lee there in Old City, thank you very much.
Cover your hands.
And now I will go to the next one. This is another one about when they begin their lawsuits.
In the fight to restore exhibits about slavery at Independence National Historical Park. Yesterday, the National Park Service removed the displays following a directive by President Trump.
CBS Philadelphia investigative reporter Liz Crawford is live there with the developments. Liz.
Well, many people who visited here today said they wanted to see this for themselves after the displays were taken down. Now, handmade signs have been taped up here that say things like "Learn all history" and "History is real." Person after person showed up to the president's house in Old City, Philadelphia on Friday.
It's like breaking my heart.
Not to see what's at the exhibit, rather what's not at the exhibit. Thursday, staff with the National Park Service removed displays from the president's house, just steps from the Liberty Bell. The outdoor exhibit, which opened in 2010, was meant to examine the paradox of slavery and freedom. Presidents Washington and Adams lived at this site along with enslaved people.
Acknowledging that contradiction doesn't undermine the idea of America. It's the thing that makes us stronger.
A spokesperson with the Interior Department, which oversees the Park Service, said it is implementing President Trump's executive order on restoring truth and sanity to American history, which required federal agencies to review some materials to ensure accuracy, honesty, and alignment with shared national values.
You can't erase history. And I think it's foolish to think that you can.
The city of Philadelphia has now filed a lawsuit in federal court seeking to have the exhibit restored. The suit says the Department of the Interior violated the law by removing the displays without the city's permission. CBS News Philadelphia asked Mayor Parker for her response to the removal.
That agreement requires parties to meet and confer if there are to be any changes made to an exhibit.
City Council President Kenyatta Johnson called it totally unacceptable and said removing the exhibits is an effort to whitewash American history. History cannot be erased simply because it is uncomfortable.
To me, it looks like vandalism. They came and they took away stories that were very important.
Now, in a statement, the Interior Department said in part, we encourage the city of Philadelphia to focus on getting their jobless rates down and ending their reckless cashless bail policy instead of filing frivolous lawsuits in the hopes of demeaning our brave founding fathers. I asked the Department of the Interior where they are currently keeping the displays and whether or not they are being preserved. No one has answered those questions. In Old City, Liz Crawford, CBS News, Philadelphia.
All right, Liz, thank you for that update.
I need.
And now I found it is a 16-minute video, and it is going to explain the president's house and the preservation and how it was made. And we're going to watch that next. I think it was very informative and why it is so important that it was done and put up.
From 1790 to 1800, when Philadelphia was our new nation's capital, Presidents George Washington and John Adams lived and worked in a mansion, the President's House, at 6th and Market Streets. 9 enslaved Africans owned by George Washington also lived in that house. This video provides a glimpse into the long and challenging process that resulted in the creation of the President's House, Freedom and Slavery and the Making of a New Nation, located steps from the Liberty Bell in Independence National Historical Park.
This is what they tried to erase.
The site examines the contradictions, conflicts, and politics surrounding the house, illuminating a little-known fact of America's history, that enslaved Africans toiled for President Washington. Above all, the site pays homage to the 9 people whose names would otherwise be lost to history.
The project actually has 2 beginnings. One is its origins out of community protest, when people realized that that the first 2 U.S. presidents had served their terms of office there.
We found out that this site, America's first White House, is where George Washington held black men, black women, and black children as slaves.
Gary Nash, who has written extensively on the topic, went on a radio show here in Philadelphia, Radio Times, to talk about his book, but he mentioned this. And when he mentioned this, the lines just were abuzz with interest about it. And then within a short period of time, Michael Cord, a lawyer and an activist in Philadelphia, he helped bring this into greater public consciousness by creating an organization called Avenging the Ancestors Coalition.
I was hosting a program on WHAT at the time. So we started talking about it on air, and the callers were absolutely incensed.
So we were absolutely outraged, and we began with a letter writing campaign.
And we started to build support for the notion of a commemoration for the enslaved Africans.
And we wanted to have public investment, which was why, in terms of strategy, it was writing editorials, it was having public meetings, it was staging protests, it was developing and distributing literature, hounding, whether they were public officials or journalists and what have you, to keep this story, because we wanted civic engagement. This was a civic project in which history was now going to count for everybody.
The bone of contention was what would be the primary focus of this project?
There were some people on the committee who were involved who felt as though the primary focus should be the house, the architecture, and the beautiful story about the founding of the nation.
Or would it be the issue of slavery? And to the extent that there was any real contention, that was and still is the contention.
So we wanted the emphasis to be on these 9 or more enslaved Africans, because that was the new story. That was what had not been disclosed before. So there was always this kind of push and pull between these two schools of thought.
Early into the project, we conducted an archaeological dig as part of due diligence, and lo and behold, the archaeologists located actual structural remains from that very house. There was a lot of controversy with respect to whether you just bury it back up and keep it moving with the original plan, or do we rethink this, create another exhibit experience, and then have to raise the money to incorporate it. The project started under Mayor John Street, and then Mayor Michael Nutter came on board.
I just thought it was important that the mayor of the city of Philadelphia, along with our 1.5 million residents, pick up this cause and make this great project happen.
So the congressman, along with Joe Huffle's efforts, Congressman Fattah, all of them got together and said, how can we make this happen? And they were able to secure $3.5 million, and I believe that was in 2003.
The other part about that find is that most people on the Oversight Committee, especially the African American members of the committee, did not want the archaeology to become the dominant piece of this. I believe that as whites in particular saw evidence of the true existence of this site, it became an opportunity to discuss slavery in a way that it had not resonated with people before. It's almost as if looking down into that pit and seeing passageways where enslaved would serve meals or work in the kitchen really brought a reality that didn't exist before. And it also catapulted the project to a different level
It is
of
when you see it
visibility and national importance.
in person.
From 1790 to 1800 was an incredibly boisterous, event-filled, dramatic decade.
And this is a world of revolution, and things were a swirl.
The French Revolution had broken out in 1789 as the Congress is getting ready to come here. The Haitian Revolution breaks out in 1791, in the second year that Congress sat here as the nation's capital. And then in the middle of it all, there's this devastating yellow fever epidemic in 1793, wipes out, an extraordinary percentage of the population, something like 10% of the population. A two-party system is just beginning to take shape. It's a very contentious decade, and imagine the challenges of the first two presidents, Washington and John Adams, as they're trying to get the ship of state into calmer water.
You also had in Philadelphia at this time an enormous amount of hope on the part of the African people who lived here, largely because, as you might understand, they had also been through the American Revolution. In the birth of the country and in the presence of this house, you have this incredible situation where everything is coming together. And the struggle for liberty would also be a struggle on the part of the African people for freedom.
Well, Philadelphia was the largest and the most important free black community in the country in the 1790s.
The free black population in Philadelphia was quite large, given the free black populations in other cities.
And it had just emerged as a free black community only a few years before, because most of the African Americans here, when the revolution broke out, were enslaved. It was in this decade that the first two black independent churches were formed.
The African Methodist Episcopal Church and the African Methodist Episcopal Zion. African people are thinking, and not only are they thinking, but they are building their own institutions.
And schools with them, and other black institutions.
The Free African Society. I mean, there are many things that are going on in that population. The Quaker community is quite active in Philadelphia.
Washington was troubled with slavery, and before he died, he wrote a will providing for the freedom of those enslaved Africans under his control. But while he was here as president, he would have his Mount Vernon slaves here to do the work and do his bidding.
Yep.
The other thing that we know is that Washington would periodically take Africans back to Virginia because, of course, there was a law.
And the Pennsylvania law of 1780 provided that any person brought into the state would be free after 6 months.
Whenever that time was, 6 months or what have you, Washington would always take them back to Virginia.
Be sure that the person, one of the 9 who were here, would not be freed under this Pennsylvania law.
I must say, this is the first kind of project like this. It's unique. I mean, it's not a straight architectural project. It's an interpretive project.
We didn't rebuild the house. It's an open-air structure.
You can enter the site from several directions, so there is no one direction, but it's likely that most people will be coming from the visitor center across the street, across Market Street, and as they do, they will see the front of the house, and it'll draw them to it. So if they come through the front door, immediately on the left, one of the few walls is the first panel that starts to tell you about the house. On the right side is the family dining room, and you can't help but see that fireplace there. And above the fireplace is a video where in 1795 there was probably a painting or a mirror. So one begins to sort of visualize and imagine being in that room because they've been in other houses like that.
There are bronze footprints in a certain area of the site that symbolize escape to freedom. There's the memorial enclosure in the back. It's a very tight space. It once was the livery stable. It's a confined space because we wanted to give a feel for the cramped quarters that many enslaved people throughout this country experienced, that their living conditions were not always ideal. And also that memorial space allows us to pay homage to the various nations or tribes in Africa from whence these enslaved came.
I worked with the writer Lorene Cary to create a number of dramatic vignettes that look at the lives of the enslaved Africans in that house, as well as members of the Free African community in Philadelphia. These were dramatic vignettes, that is, they were scripted, based on historical documents, based on the information that we could find about the 9. Lorene Cary is an extraordinary writer. She really was this dogged researcher, reading through volumes and volumes of George Washington's papers and journals. This is where a lot of the evidence was. What really inspired us, I think, was really a vision that came from community representatives.
I really recommend, if they keep this up and you're in Philly, to go visit it. It's amazing.
Some of the enslaved African Americans who were in the president's house.
We have an idea what their lives were like. We know, for example, that they were enslaved
Really
by George
quite moving.
Washington. We know also that to be enslaved was not merely to be a servant. To be enslaved meant that you were chattel. And to be chattel meant that you were property. To be property meant that you basically had no rights at all.
You were in law a thing, and you could be bought, sold, traded, exchanged, given away as a gift. In the case of Oni Judge, she was the maidservant of Martha Washington. And as such, she would have had a contact with the Washington family and would have actually gone outside of the house as well, so that she would have interactions with a lot of different people.
Often they run the errands, they do the shopping, they tend the horses, so they're out and about the city.
I mean, just going out to walk to the market every day to get the food that had to be cooked and prepared means that you're out talking to a wide variety of people. And I have this sense of them walking out and doing that, and someone saying, Karen, let me talk to you for a minute. Do you really want to continue to stay there as an enslaved person? Think about the possibilities, and if you think you want to leave, come talk to us, we'll help you.
And she runs away, because she knows that she's, quote, going to be given away, which could happen to any enslaved person. I mean, you didn't control your own life, no matter how much latitude you had in terms of your skills or what have you in the end. And so she made a decision that it was better for her to have freedom, even being bereft of part of her family, than to continue to be enslaved to another person, even though it was a member of the Washington family.
When she left the house and made it down to the waterfront, and there was a ship there, and she got on that ship and she was out of here. Well, we don't know the details, but I don't think it could have happened without this kind of web of connections between free and slave.
Hope she had a good life after that.
We tell the story of the founding of the country. And so this exhibit is just perfect. It fits in with our main interpretive themes. In fact, it richly illustrates one of the main interpretive themes.
It really does.
I'm excited being the head of an African American museum that is 4 blocks away, because we get to really create a context for what this story is about and what it means.
We'd like to have this project continue to generate conversation and discovery. It has great potential to do that.
While men were talking about freedom, other men and women were enslaved within a block away from each other. That's the great contradiction here. That's the great juxtaposition, but it's also the great story that must be told.
Must be and preserved.
The context
you can't erase
of the most historic square mile anywhere in the United States of America.
10 years after the debate began, the President's House, Freedom and Slavery in the Making of a New Nation, is now open. In the heart of our nation's birthplace, we reveal a hidden story of our common past. It's a story that should inspire dialogue and understanding and remind visitors of our collective responsibility to ensure the freedoms promised by America's founding.
I just wanted to let the credits roll for everybody that participated in that because they did such a good job. And I'll have this also in sourcing too. Okay, next we're going to move on to a short clip of the judge ordering the Trump administration to restore the slavery exhibit. Here we go. Let me share the screen.
President's Day, a major update in the fight over the slavery exhibit removed from the president's
And it was perfect. It happened on President's Day.
I'm Yuki Washington.
And I'm Natasha Brown. A federal judge just ruled on a lawsuit in the city's favor, saying this exhibit must be restored. And CBS Philadelphia's Dan Snyder is live on Independence Mall. Dan, you've got the very latest.
Yeah, good evening to you guys. You know, this historic site was in part meant to honor the enslaved people who were held here. And aside from being President's Day, that ruling came down coincidentally at a time when dozens of people had gathered here rallying to demand that these exhibits be put back up. Now, while they are celebrating today, they also tell us that they don't believe their fight is over just yet. It was the moment Michael Cord with the Avenging the Ancestors Coalition announced to a crowd of dozens a federal judge sided with the city of Philadelphia and ordered all exhibits that were removed from the president's house to be put back.
But better than fighting the good fight is winning the good fight. And today we won.
The judge's ruling says the site must be restored to its standing on January 21st, the day before the exhibit was removed. It came after President Trump's executive order last year titled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. The news also came as people with the coalition were holding a President's Day rally, calling for the panels to be restored.
So this has been a very rewarding effort, but also it's crazy that in 2026 we still have to do this. In 2026 we still have to fight for the truth.
The Interior Department has not commented on today's ruling so far. However, in a statement last month, the department said in part they were not, quote, erasing history, and that, quote, the order directed a review of certain interpretive content to ensure parks tell a full and accurate story of American history. The department also said signage should be, quote, informed by current scholarship and expert review, not through a narrow ideological lens. But those who have fought for the restoration of this site say this is a true telling of history.
It is. We understand that our history isn't great, our history has blemishes, but we have to tell it because it is the history of this country. It is what made this country, and it is the fabric of this country.
Cord says he believes the federal government will appeal the decision, which could keep the displays down longer. In the meantime, people have taken to putting up their own signs.
I felt that it was a horrible thing that they would take our history down. I think it's everybody's history.
And while Cord believes there's still a fight ahead, he said he's optimistic about today's news.
So this tells me that there's some glimmer of hope for the future of America.
Now, the judge's order also says the government cannot damage the displays or make any more changes here. There is no timetable for when the exhibits will be restored at this site. However, Cord does tell us he doesn't expect the federal government to move quickly as they go through a potential appeals process. For now, live at Independence Mall, Dan Snyder, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. Democratic Congressman Dwight Evans from Philadelphia just released this statement saying this is a victory for all Philadelphians and Americans over a shameful attempt by the Trump-Vance administration to whitewash our history.
Rain-X.
Okay, and the last one I have here, let me let the commercial go through here. 1 second. Is slavery exhibit being restored at the president's house, and this shows them putting stuff back up.
Breaking right now at noon on CBS News Philadelphia. As we speak, slavery exhibits are being put back up at Independence Mall. This follows an order from a judge to do so, and it's happening despite pushback from federal officials. Let's get right out to our Dan Snyder, who is live at the exhibit in Old City with those breaking details. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Nikki, good afternoon to you. And you can see behind me, National Park Service staff hard at work here, putting up these displays that were taken down late last month. You can see they're prepping this wall. I can tell you the wall to the left of here, wall to the right of here, those exhibits have been put up. And we have some video that we can show you here, taken just within the last few hours as staff was putting these back up. What we were told by staff on scene here, these are the original plaques, the original displays that were taken down. Now, this all stems from the city's lawsuit against the federal government demanding that these be put back up. A federal judge ruled in the city's favor yesterday, releasing a new order saying that the federal government was not complying with her order. She gave the government until 5 p.m. tomorrow to reinstate this historic site. And you can see that work is being done right now. We've been seeing a lot of people
so
coming
glad
out,
to see it go
taking
back
pictures,
up.
a lot of smiles from people who were out here and who have supported the effort to bring these back up. One of those, Mayor Sherelle Parker. She stopped by very briefly just to see
these displays being put back up. She thanked the National Park Service workers here who were doing that. You know, the workers here, they've been taking care of these panels. They've been leaning them against foam. They've been polishing them and cleaning them off when they get put up. So we're going to continue to follow this throughout the day as more and more of these displays get returned to the president's house here. For now, live on Independence Mall, Dan Snyder, we'll send it back to you.
Dan, you've been following this story for several months now. We know you're going to continue following this developing situation. You'll have more later. Thanks so much.
And Taj and I were there. Let's see, I had COVID December 2024. I got it at the end of Christmas. And I was recovering. So it would have been the spring of 2025. We went and we spent a night in Philly. And then on our way back, we were going to see our son who goes to UNC. And on our way back, we met up with Quacks. He's been on my show before, Conspiracy Hodgepodge. And we had met up with him. And Taj and I ourselves one day went just, messing around in Philly and stuff. We've been there many times, and we went there. So I did pull some of a few pictures Taj took when we were there. Let me see if I can pull these up here from when we were there, and I'll show those, and I'll end with that. But yeah, if you ever get a chance, go and support it, and hopefully the Trump administration does not win this lawsuit, and it does not go through. Let me see. Philly 1. Here we go. That is it says Mount Vernon to Philadelphia, Path to Freedom for Some. The 9 enslaved men and women of the president's house were chosen by Washington to accompany him to Philadelphia. They were separated from their families back in Mount Vernon and rotated out of state regularly to prevent them from gaining freedom under Pennsylvania law. Christopher Shields, enslaved attendant to Washington. Hercules, enslaved cook. Richmond, Hercules, enslaved son. Gills, enslaved stable hand. Oni, judge, enslaved maid and seamstress to Martha. Austin, Ona's enslaved half-brother, house servant. Paris, enslaved stable hand. Mull, enslaved maid to Martha. Joe Richardson, enslaved, I can't see that word there, even with my glasses, for the president's coach. Let me remove that one. Replace. Okay, I can put up another one. Here we go. Let me get my second one. Should have put these in another file folder. They're in a huge one with lots of images. Okay, Philly 2. And this is just a picture that's on there. Freedom might be too great a temptation that he took. One of the things that they took down and they're putting back up. Put up my third one here. Let's see the third one. Here we go. That's about the chef Hercules. I don't know if I can zoom in or not. Probably you guys can later when you watch it. Let's go to the fourth one. That is a picture of one of the whole walls, the business of slavery. And again, they took this all down, and it did look like vandalism, I think was the one quote from the one lady. And I think that was an accurate description of what it looked like after the National Park Service took down everything of that. Like, it looked terrible. You can't erase what history is. I mean, it is what it is. Good, bad, and ugly. Okay, where's the next one at? 1, 2, 3, 4. Thought I uploaded more. Oh, here we go. It's this one. That's part of the exhibit too. And they had TV screens that would play like automatically and tell you the story as you walked around. I thought it was great because it was such an interpretive exhibit. And it wasn't one of those boring ones where you're like, oh, I'm going to ignore this, not listen to it. You know what I mean? When you go to some museums or whatever, you're not interested in it. Like, it was really well done, really well done. we spent a lot of time there. Okay, is that the last picture I pulled from my husband's phone? Oh no, here's one more. And that's what it looks like down when they were talking about the excavation. It's kind of hard if it's a sunny day, but you look down in and you can see where they excavated and like where the slaves would have been cooking or during their work or, where the kitchens were and things like that. And it's quite, I don't know what the right word is for it when you're thinking about it and looking at it. But it's really something. But yeah, thought it was important to cover this and talk about it because it had been going on. I'm kind of glad that so many things were going on because I got to a point where there was some resolution and they put everything back up because I had been following it all along and Taj was helping me and giving me updates. So at least there's a resolution now. And now it's just to see what the new judge says over this battle. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little historical talk and what the Trump administration order is doing to history or trying to do, rewriting it. And so I'm going to end with that. And like I said, it'll be up with all my sourcing. I'll put it on all the platforms that I normally do. And I will be going live soon. I have another idea for a live. And I thank you all, to all my supporters, and I will talk to you all soon. Thank you. Bye.